Hey guys, Sterling here, coming at you with another Bleach What If, and I am beyond hyped because today we are exploring one of my favorite fighting forces of all time, the Visored. Now, when it comes to the Visored, they really are one of Bleach's ultimate what ifs. I mean, these guys are awesome, but ultimately let us down in so many ways, and to be honest, I oftentimes find myself liking the Visored for more of what they could have been than what they actually turned out to be. So today, in our what if story and discussion, we are exploring the Visored, specifically in the Thousand Year Blood War, and we are going to give these guys an opportunity to not only redeem themselves, but become the trump card that, well, they really should have been. Because today, we are going to allow Shinji, Rose, and Kensei to use their hollow masks in the first invasion. We're going to explore what that would have looked like, what kind of battles would have came out of something like that. Guys, it is an absolute blast. This what if is beyond insane. We even have a Shinji versus As Nodt battle that I think you guys are going to be very surprised by the outcome. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself, guys. Without further ado, let's get right into what if the Visored used their holification powers in the Thousand Year Blood War. Our what if story starts out in Serete, where the first Quincy invasion is well underway. The news of the Bankai stealing ability of the enemy has the court guard absolutely shocked. Captain Shinji Haruko and his lieutenant Momo race down the corridors of Serete. Those fools! How could they have let their Bankai be stolen? These enemies have been prepared, Momo. I believe they've been watching us, studying us, and there's a good chance they know every tactic a traditional Shinigami has to throw at them, and more so, they probably have a counter for it all. But it's a good thing I'm no longer a traditional Shinigami. This is where we would get a flashback in Shinji's mind, where he's remembering back to a hypothetical verdict that us fans never got to see, but Shinji, Rose, and Kensei would be in a courtroom, and they would be getting the verdict of, yes, you guys can become captains again, but you are not to use the taboo of holification in Serete or Soul Society for that matter. And of course, Shinji, Rose, and Kensei would oblige because they want to become captains again, and they promise to not use their holification powers in Serete. I believe that's why they never used their masks in the Thousand Year Blood Wars, because they made a promise to Yama himself. Anyway, Shinji would be thinking back to that day, and he'd be thinking to himself, the Quincy are not an enemy that we can fend off with Shikai alone. I'm going to have to break that promise and use my hollow mask. It'd be a very strong flashback. It'd be something I would love to see. It'd be absolutely incredible. But anyways, out of Shinji's head and back to reality where the war's actually going on, Shinji tells Momo to connect him with Kensei and Rose immediately. We now switch scenes to the captains whose Bankai had just been stolen. Soifan, Hitsugaya, Kamamura, and Byakuya are in dire straits, for without their Bankai, they don't have the firepower to take the Quincy down. But little do they know, 3 allies are on the way. 3 allies who possess an ability that might just give them a chance. Looks like I made it just in time, Kuchiki. Momo, get Byakuya as far away as possible. I'll handle this freak. Shinji thinks to himself, I hope the others made it in time. So guys, simultaneously, while Shinji's showing up on scene to help Byakuya, Rose is showing up to aid Kamamura, and Kensei is showing up to aid Soifan. So when Shinji told Momo to connect him with Rose and Kensei, what he was doing is he was telling them like, hey, go and find a captain whose Bankai has been stolen and help them out, because they're probably in dire straits. And guys, if we need to use the hollow masks, then do it. I'm telling you guys, we have to do it because this war is something we cannot lose. So guys, what we have here is an epic showdown, a 3-way showdown. We've got Rose versus Bambietta, Kensei versus BG9, and Shinji versus As Nodt. I can't even begin to explain to you guys how epic of a moment this would be. They'd all be arriving on scene, like I said, and they would begin to do battle with the Sternritter, and it would be absolutely incredible. incredible. Now, the first of these titanic battles that I want to take a look at is Shinji's battle with As Nodt, which has already begun. Shinji is doing everything he can to dodge the fierce blades of Senbon Kageyoshi. So we've got As Nodt, and he's flinging Senbon Kageyoshi around, trying to nail Shinji, and Shinji's flash-stepping around the rubble of the 6th Division barracks, and he's doing everything he can not to get hit by Senbon Sakura, but he's got his cocky nature to him, and he's somewhat mocking As Nodt, and he's like, if Byakuya was chasing me with this Bankai, I'd be worried, but you haven't mastered it nearly as well as he has in his lifetime. So Shinji would be looking down on Az, but it'd be pretty scary situation because he is getting chased by Senbon Sakura, and he's barely dodging them. And keep in mind, simultaneously while this is happening, Rose is doing everything he can not to get taken out by Bambietta's terrifying Explode Shrift, and Kensei is battling BG9, fending off BG9's mechanical tentacles. He's using his little Shikai, I forget what it's called, but that army blade, he's knocking them back and forth, and he's doing everything he can to not be hit by the tentacles. And simultaneously, all three of them, if this was an anime, the screen would split into three, and they'd all be like, well, it's time to pick up the pace because this is not working. And the spiritual pressure around them would begin to build, and they'd run their hands across their face, revealing a hollow mask. Yes, they'd be using their holification powers, and guys, this is where these battles really, really pick up. As you can tell, I'm getting beyond excited, but we would have a holification reveal for the first time in the 1,000-Year Blood War. Shinji is so cold. So is Kensei. Well, Rose, he's all right. But anyways, guys, this would be absolutely incredible. With all these what ifs, eventually we would like to get them animated with real voice actors and whatnot, but for now we'll just have to do the storytelling. But if this was an anime, it would split to a 3-way screen or a manga, revealing the hollow masks for Shinji, Rose, and Kensei. You'd get that old school Bleach effect where the spiritual pressure around them starts to build and the screen gets a little shaky, that old school spiritual pressure vibe, and the Sternritter would be looking at them like, what is going on? Like, we did not have any datin on this. Like, BG9 would be like, this is not in my data bank. What is happening? What is happening? Like, spiritual pressure. Like, his sensors would be going off because Kensei's spiritual pressure would begin to rise with the use of his hollow mask. Like I said, this would be an incredibly impactful scene, and now these Sternritter are going to have to deal with something they've never dealt with before: a holified Shinigami. So at this point, each one of the holified Shinigami on the battlefield would have their Shikai released with their hollow mask augmentation as well. So first, let's take a look at this insane battle between Shinji and Aznodt. Now at this point, Az is really on the ropes. With the extra speed provided to Shinji by his hollow mask, Shinji can pretty much dodge Senbon Kageyoshi fairly easily, and Aznodt is freaking out. He's like, why? Why won't my precious Senbon Sakura destroy you? Like, you have to keep in mind, Az, had an obsession over Senbon Kageyoshi, so at first he'd want to use that to take Shinji down, and, well, it wouldn't be working very well. Shinji would not only be too quick, but he'd be peppering Az with Seros. It would be an absolute spectacle to see, and Aznodt is also dealing with yet another problem. His world is beginning to spin. Up is down, down is up. Shinji begins to speak to Az. Now by it, feel should you, sealed is fate your. So Aznot's beginning to feel the effects of Shinji's Shikai, and with Az's senses confused, Shinji prepares to blitz him and end the battle. But suddenly, Shinji is frozen in his tracks. Shinji thinks to himself, what was that just now? What was that I felt? It was deep. I don't even understand it myself. Shinji would try to shake it off and continue to flash step around the battlefield, but the nagging feeling in the back of his head was beginning to engulf his thoughts. It was fear that he was feeling. absolute fear. His hollow mask was helping him from not falling deeper and deeper into the fear. He was still able to move, but at this point, it was an absolute race against time. Was Shinji Shikai going to confuse Az enough for Shinji to take the final blow, or would Az's fear shrift completely cripple Shinji to the point where he couldn't land the finishing blow? It would be a race against time. Shinji Shikai was the only thing keeping him alive at this point, as not sending fierce attacks with Senbonzakura Kageyoshi, but missing just slightly due to the confusion that he's feeling from Shinji Shikai. The fear begins to engulf Shinji even more. He begins to imagine his fellow Visored being eliminated by Soul Society. He sees Lisa being destroyed. He sees Rose and Kensei being eliminated, his worst fears. Shinji tries to attack As Nodt, but misses. At this point, things are getting even worse for Shinji, for Mask the Masculine has arrived back on the battlefield. Now Shinji isn't facing one Stern Ritter, he's facing two. The fear is still enveloping his mind. He can barely even move at this point. Aznodt and Mask begin to approach him. Shinji, engulfed in fear, can still make out what was happening, and he begins to chuckle. I was waiting for you to arrive. I've been tracking your spiritual pressure. I had to wait for you to get here, because I needed you to be here so I could do this. And out of complete fear, Shinji screams, Bankai! This was an absolute gamble for Shinji that completely paid off. He had no idea whether or not his Bankai was going to be able to be stolen by Mask, but he had noticed during his fight with Aznodt that when he used his holification, Az slowed down just slightly. The Seros affected him a lot more than normal attacks, so he thought just maybe activating Bankai with his hollow mask would allow him to not let his Bankai be stolen. Little to Shinji's knowledge, it was the hollow inside of him that would not allow Mask to steal his Bankai, but nonetheless, Shinji's Bankai activates and Mask sends a Heilig file through Aznodt. Mask would begin to choke Aznodt, as Aznodt sends Senbonzakura through James and up through Mask's back. Shinji had planned all along to use his Bankai if things got extremely terrible. Like I said, it was a gamble, but it paid off. That's why he told Momo to get away from the area as far as possible. He did not want Momo nor Byakuya caught up in his Bankai, for friend was foe and foe was friend, and Mask and Aznodt were destroying each other in front of Shinji's eyes. Now, we're going to talk about Shinji's battle more at the end of this video, but more or less what happened there is Mask would attempt to steal Shinji's Bankai to no avail. It would not work, and by then it was already too late. Shinji's Bankai had completely taken over Aznodt and Mask, and ultimately they end up destroying each other. Now, I do want to get into Rose and Bambietta's battle, because this is one that's also extremely fun. Now, Rose, let's be honest, he did not get treated very well in the Thousand Year Blood War, but being pinned up against Bambietta gives us a unique situation to help this guy flourish a little bit more, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So with the battle with Bambietta and Rose is also flash stepping around the battlefield. He has his hollow mask on, so his speed is augmented. He has his Shikai out, and he's able to deal with the explode somewhat by just taking his whip, grabbing a piece of rubble, and throwing it in front of him fast enough to dodge the explode. But as Bambietta shoots more Reishi towards him, it's getting trickier and trickier for him. But with the news that Shinji's Bankai could not be stolen, Rose immediately activates his, and guys, this is where I think he'd have the absolute one-up on Bambietta, because his Bankai would have worked on Mask if Mask wouldn't have ripped his ears off, but guys, with an opponent like Bambietta, she's not ripping her ears off. Like, she's not doing it. She would she wouldn't even think, even if Rose told her the weakness, she's not ripping her own ears off like Mask did. So honestly, I think if Rose did activate his Bankai in a fight against Bambietta, he'd come out on top. And it'd be absolutely incredible to see, because Bambietta would be completely overwhelmed by all the illusions of Rose's Bankai, and we'd finally get to see the final act and what it actually does, and it would be the end of Bambietta. Now, I'm not saying it would be that easy, because Bambietta could use her Volsh standing, which would make her have to drop Kamamura's Bankai, but I think she may possibly try to use Kamamura's Bankai to defend herself to no avail, and ultimately Rose would end up taking Bambietta down in an incredible fight. Rose finally redeems himself. Like I said, even if he does run his mouth and tells Bambietta the secret to his Bankai, I don't think she's going to have anything to defend against it. And so ultimately, Bambietta falls to Rose in an epic, epic battle. Now, like I said, we're going to discuss all three of these battles more at the end of the video, but even if Bambietta freaked out and launched her Explode Shrift in every direction, I believe Rose could probably counteract it with a strong enough Sero. You know, he launches a Sero and moves slightly in a line and takes out the Explode Shrifts coming at him, because with Bambietta's Shrift, it is just Reishi getting shot into something, making it explode. So it's possible that a Sero would counteract that, especially since it's coming from a holified Shinigami. We'll get back to that battle as well, but we now switch to Kensei's battle with BG9. Kensei is trying to find a blind spot in the robotic Quincy's defenses, but to no avail. BG9's alien-like tentacles aim to end Kensei. Kensei is fending them off, sparks fly as he redirects the tentacles with his trench knife like Zanpakuto. His ranged air blades are making for the perfect defense against BG9. This battle is absolutely a spectacle as BG9 launches a massive attack from Soifan's Bankai that completely obliterates the battlefield. But it was too late, because during the battle, Kensei could feel that Shinji and Rose had activated their Bankai, and at the time that BG9 launched that massive attack, Kensei activated his Bankai, and he's able to blitz BG9 and land one hit with the Bankai that completely pummels BG9. Now, guys, maybe I'm giving Kensei a little bit too much credit in this story, but his Shikai and Bankai don't get enough credit for how strong they are. The Visored all get shafted in their fights, but I think in this fight, Kensei versus BG9, Kensei's the better fighter. He's faster with his Hollow Mask, and as long as he can dodge Jakuho Raikkoben, then he's ultimately going to come out on top at the end of the day. I think Kensei's Shikai alone could redirect the blades, just like we heard in that little mini segment just now. He'd be able to redirect the tentacles with his wind strikes. His Shikai is extremely powerful, and his Bankai is even stronger. So, like I said, if he can dodge Jakuho Raikkoben, then he's going to ultimately end up destroying BG9, but this battle would still be a ton of fun to see. A lot of people don't think that the Hollow Masks augment the Visored just because scaling got a little bit wonky, but they definitely do. So there's even a good chance that without his Bankai, with just his Hollow Mask and his Shikai alone, he could take out BG9 that way. Maybe I'm giving Kensei too much credit. Tell me in the comments below if you don't agree with me. But at the end of the day, the three Visored Shinigami saved the day, and with their hollow powers, they were able to defend not just from the Quincy Bankai stealing medallions, but it also gave them the extra little bit of power to be able to fight off the mid-tier Sternritter that they fought in this story. Now, as these three battles wrap themselves up, so does our what if, because there is a timer on the Thousand Year Blood War first invasion, but I'm sure the Visored would try to do their best to go and aid other Shinigami such as Toshiro, but ultimately the Quincy withdraw after defeating Yamamoto and battling Ichigo. But the trump card of the Visored using their hollow masks was extremely beneficial to helping Soul Society survive the first invasion. Now, we aren't done yet, guys, because I do want to discuss some things, and keep in mind, this is just my interpretation of how I think things would go down if Kensei, Rose, and Shinji were to have used their holification powers, but I want to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Now, something that would come out of them using their hollow powers in the first invasion is I'm sure Mayuri would come up with the same conclusion that Kisuke did and realize that hollows obviously are the Quincy's natural enemy, and it would poison them if they were to try to steal, like, say, Ichigo's Bankai, or in this case, Shinji, Rose, or Kensei's. But in this what if, Mayuri would probably discover that revelation, and they would have some sort of anti-Quincy medallion weapon long before the second invasion even begun. Now, speaking of that, something that happened in this story is when Shinji's battling As Nodt, he notices that his Hollow Ryatsu, after activating his holification, is just slightly affecting Az in a negative way, to the point where it's not that detrimental to him, but it is slowing him down just a tad. And the Seros are definitely more effective than normal attacks. Now, there is this huge misconception that, like, the Espada would wipe the floor with Sternritter just because the Seros alone are their Hollow Ryatsu, but that's just not true. Now, if they were to try to absorb, like, a Resurrection, if a Quincy or Sternritter were to try to absorb that, then yes, it would poison them tremendously. But in this story, we just did it to a little extent, to the point where Shinji, Rose, and Kensei's holification Ryatsu were affecting their opponents. But like I said, this is just my interpretation. I want to know what you guys think. Truly, the Visored should be extremely strong. They just get really bad battles in the actual story. Like, Shinji is so cold, and if he would have used his hollow mask against Bambietta in the second invasion, he would have definitely beat her, in my opinion. Now, if that's something you guys want to see, a continuation of this story, like, what if the Visored used their holification powers in the second invasion? That way we could get the rest of the Visored incorporated into the story and explore Varvel in the end of the series with these guys using their holification powers. If that's something you guys think would be fun, then tell me in the comments below. Now, as far as these battles go, do you see them playing out how I said they would? Do you think the Seros would be able to, Rose's Seros would be able to stop Bambietta's Explode Shrift? Do you think it would counteract it? Do you think the Seros would be detrimental to As Nodt, Mask, and all the others that participated in this battle? Do you guys agree with me? Do you think Bambietta would fall prey to Rose's Bankai, or do you think she would rip her ears off like Mask did? Like, for your majesty, you-ha, and rip them off. I don't see that happening. She's such a cosmetically pleasing character, and she really cares about that, so I highly doubt she'd do anything to that pretty face of hers or her ears. But if you guys disagree, tell me in the comments below. Did I give the holified Shinigami too much credit? Like, do you think Kensei would be able to take care of BG9 like I said he would? Honestly, I think his Shikai and Bankai are extremely slept on, and the Visored as a whole are slept on. Like I said, they are so cold. They're holified Shinigami, and they should be much stronger than they're portrayed in the series. Like, my headcanon is that the Hollow Mask should provide them with at least a 5 times augmentation of their abilities, or maybe even 10 times, because Ichigo seems to get much, much stronger when he utilizes his hollow mask. Now, I know it's a different type of holification, but I'm beginning to ramble. I want to know what you guys think. I really want to discuss these battles. Do you think Shinji would be able to... Do you think his hollow mask would slightly help him overcome one of the shrifts, or do you not agree with that? I want to talk everything that we discussed in this what if. How do you think these guys using their holification powers in the first invasion would go down? I think it would benefit them a lot. I think these battles would be so much fun. Like I said, they'd be flash stepping around the battlefield. This is kind of one of those things where if you like plug the controller in and make these guys fight how they should be capable of fighting, then they would do very, very well. It's like I said, they just writing wise, they don't get the credit they deserve. But these guys are very, very strong, very, very cool. I could talk about Shinji as a character for 45 minutes. He's so cultured, and what he had to go through with being exiled and leading a team of exiled Visored Shinigami and all the training, and him having to be the leader of that and brunting all that and remaining the strong one. And like I said, I could talk about Shinji for days. He's one of my favorite characters. But as far as these battles, guys, I want to talk all things Visored, all things Bleach, all things Sternritter, all things First Invasion. Like I said, tell me if you guys would enjoy a part 2 of this where we discuss the second invasion. Tell me what you think of these battles. I want to discuss everything, guys, because this video was a blast. It's really nice to being back to making Bleach What Ifs. We've had so much bad luck as far as studio. We had a tree come through the bar. Just the most off-the-wall stuff. So being back talking Bleach with you guys is so much fun. So let's keep that up in the comments below. I want to talk how you guys think the Hollow Masks would help the Soul Society in the first invasion. These conversations are going to be a ton of fun, and I'm really looking forward to them. But guys, until the next video, this is Sterling signing out. Until the next What If, I'll see you guys in the next one.